That match up? What's going on, guys? This is the first episode of the Noob. In fact, the first video that I'd filmed with my brand new camera in 4K. And unfortunately, what I discovered when I loaded it into my editing software was that for some reason my external mic was picking up like 10 times the volume, too much gain, and the video was unusable. The audio was ear piercing. So I was going to scrap this video altogether. Here's Mark eating a banana. So I was gonna scrap this video altogether, but Sarah, who's often sitting in the background of these videos, actually said to me that she thought this was a very good episode, so I should somehow try to keep it. So what I've done is, I've kept the main video, but I've had to turn the audio levels down to 40%. So I didn't turn it down 40%, I turned it down from 100% to 40%. So hopefully it's still watchable. And hopefully you guys still enjoy this episode. So this is an episode called Horror Comics. Let's do this. I've been telling you a lot recently that I'm kind of a little bit over superheroes, just because I just find a lot of them aren't really well written.
Yeah, that's why you got to read the indie superheroes.
Well, that's true too. I haven't given that a chance. But
see, so don't judge. You judge.
I'm not judging.
Quickly.
I'm not judging. I'm just saying, when I go to read a book these days, I generally lean towards indies, and I'm finding, without even really realizing, one of my favorite genres is horror.
And why is that?
I don't know. The stories is just a little bit more compelling.
Well, think back why you love it so much. Is it the scare? Is it the resilience?
Well, I wouldn't say I've ever been scared from a comic book.
But is it the scare factor, the creepy factor, the resilience of a character, relatable of a character? What is it? What is it about
I guess it's just the
it?
way the stories are told. Often there's a lot more mystery to a horror story.
So let me ask you a question now. So is it supernatural horror you like? This is what I asked people who come into the store and they say, I want to read horror. And I ask them, well, there's a couple of different, there's creepy horror, supernatural horror. You know, when I say creepy, like witches, there's, you know, are you into vampire horror? Are you into,
ghosts?
Supernatural horror, that sort of stuff.
Rhinos and shit.
Yeah, so what is it, what horror do you like?
Well, my favourite series is obviously Something's Killing the Children.
Yep, and what do you say? It's a horror, obviously.
That's like
but
supernatural, I would say that.
Is that what you would? Well, you're a hashtag comic book guy.
It's like he's mad at me today because we're shooting in 4K.
Yeah, but then I can see my beautiful face, you know.
Do you see how he came prepared as horror as well? He's got the scratch on his head.
Scratch
from Freddy Krueger. He dreamt about Freddy last night.
Freddy Krueger. It was. I was in the Evil Dead forest.
Okay.
And I got attacked.
I would say that Something's Killing the Children is supernatural. I mean, it's about monsters that you can't see. I mean, only children can see. But not even just that, I just find a lot of the stories I'm reading now just seem to have that horror element to it. And it's not scary or anything. I just find it's a little more intriguing. Like for me, I like a story that just makes me want to know what's going to happen. Yeah. If you can't get me to care, then I don't.
Well, that's with everything, really.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but I force my way through some crap.
Yeah, well, sometimes you have to get through the crap to get to the good stuff, and it looks like you're finding your taste now. Think of it like this, like monsters that only children can see. How clever is that statement? Yeah. And that genre? Because how many times as kids do you hear, oh, there's a monster under my bed, and then the adults don't believe it, or they don't see it, or there's a monster in my closet, and, you know what I mean, like Monsters Inc., the cartoon, right? So I think that's a good twist on that sort of subject.
I must say, my only thing though, and this is with I think all comic books, I find it very hard, especially when you're reading like a mini-series, to something which has a set amount of issues as opposed to ongoing. I don't think that writers ever. It's very rare that they ever stick the landing as far as like the ending. I find a lot of. I'll give you some examples. You probably haven't read any of these, but The Me You Love in the Dark. I thought it was a great story. It was basically a romance story about an artist who lives in a home by herself, and she falls in love with an entity that is, I guess, kind of haunting the house. And it was an intriguing story, but then at the end, it got very out there. Like things were just very, I don't know how to explain it, comic booky is how I would generally explain it. And there's a lot of things like that. Another book I read, The Closet by, I think, was that Tynan that wrote The Closet?
So, yeah.
again, kind of intriguing. You kind of want to know what happens, and then nothing really happens. Sorry, spoiler alert. But nothing really happens in the end. I find that a lot with comic books where the ending's I'm never really fully satisfied. Ongoing is okay, because obviously, like, Someone's Killing the Children is ongoing, so the story keeps going, and I'm loving it because I just have fallen in love with the universe and the lore and all that sort of stuff.
I think they're finding a new way to keep people interested, that's one thing. And also I'm finding that to keep a story going, they're not releasing like consecutive issues, as in, you know, month after month, you know, so they're doing what I see anyway as a retailer and doing my ordering is that I'm finding that they do an arc, like 6-issue arc, and then they take a break. And that gives them time to maybe work on something else or move on, you know, that sort of thing. But I find that keeps them in the same part of doing.
You're talking about people who are writing ongoing ones there, right?
Yeah. So and that's why maybe Something Killing the Children is doing, you know, because that's what they're doing, and that goes with Saga. Saga now has come back, obviously, we all know that, and so, but it looks like he's releasing in 6-issue arcs, but it's still consecutive numbers.
That's a good way to do it, yeah. Rather than feeling rushed and forcing story, I guess.
Correct.
What would you recommend to someone who comes in and it's like, oh, I'm interested in horror? What books, what classic horrors would you recommend?
Classic horrors, huh? Oh, it's hard because I'm not really a horror guy, but you know.
But you know what to recommend.
Gideon Falls is probably one. You know, it's got a bit of a twist in it. It's got everything, time travel. It's got a bit of demon horror. Witches, I would recommend Witches by the classic now. I suppose you can call it Witches by Scott Snyder and drawn by Jock. An absolute classic. Now, I always recommend that.
I haven't read. I read Witches, the one-shot special, which came out after the original. And I thought that was pretty good, but I haven't gotten around to reading the trade.
Yeah, they never really released. I was always hoping that they would release Witches with that one-shot in the book. They haven't yet. So I remember buying a whole heap of bad eggs, and then sticking them with the trade, selling them with the trade, sticking it in the bag.
One of my earliest videos, which you should not go back and watch, is a review on that Witches story. On that Witches one shot.
Oh yeah.
Because I thought it was quite good, and considering I had no idea, I hadn't read the original story, I still thought it was very good.
Yeah, so that's definitely what I would recommend. You know, American Vampire would be another one that I would recommend.
That's another Snyder, isn't it?
Yes. It is for Vertigo. They did Vertigo. So if they're into supernatural horror or vampire horror, if you could think of something, put it in the comments, I suppose, that a horror series that you enjoy.
Like, who would you say some writers who, I guess, specialise in that? Because definitely Tynan writes a lot of horror. Snyder loves his horror.
Yeah, absolutely. Snyder did a great Batman horror called Black Mirror, which was awesome.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and Jock drew that as well.
Okay.
So that was really good. Really serial killer type horror, if you're into that, you know. So again, there's all different types of horrors. More thriller, horror type.
And I guess that's a good segue into superhero horror. Like, I was thinking to myself one day, about Tom Taylor, and I was like, I'd love to see him write horror. And I reckon if I said that to him, he'd probably say, Deceased is a horror. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and you know, Marvel back in the day did Marvel Zombies. Robert Kirkman did that, and there's they recently did DC v Vampires as well.
Yeah, see, in my head, that stuff doesn't interest me because it's just like, shouldn't these superheroes just kick vampires' butts? Like.
Yeah, well, you got to read it. We don't know. You just got to read the story. You know.
Do you count titles like Predator and Aliens horror?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that sci-fi horror you would call it?
Yeah, great segue.
Monster horror?
Great segue. Yeah, absolutely. No, I wouldn't call it monster horror. I'd call it space horror, which is very, very rare. Very rare. There's not that genre is not approached a lot. You know,
in comic books anyway.
But even in movies they haven't. There has been maybe a handful of movies that, you know, space horror that have been around. Alien,
Jason X.
Oh, come on. No, there's Alien. There's Event Horizon. There's another one I can think of.
Yeah.
You know, in comic books, you know, there's one. There was a book which I've always wanted for it to continue. Was Out of Darkness by John Layman. It was basically the Star Trek politics or bridge politics but with horror. It was very, very good. And I've always wanted it to come back. Yeah, the space horror stuff, there's not a lot. And so when something like that comes out, you gotta, I don't know, read it, see what it's like. I always gravitate to it. Another good horror would be like from Rob Gilroy, and would be Farmhand. That's another one.
Farmhand.
Yeah, so it's about a farm and grows body parts. Like it's in the future, but they're sentient as well. So that's really a really good sort of like different type of horror. But recently you had like someone like Joe Hill do his own line.
Oh yeah, because that stuff's super popular,
line,
right?
Yeah, so you got.
Did you read any of that stuff?
Yeah, The Plunge. I read The Plunge.
I was going to say that's one that's very popular.
Yeah, so he wrote two of them, which is The Plunge and Basketful of Heads.
I should get some of those trades. I think
The Plunge is like a movie, which is it's again. I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but it's really good. It's written like a film or a TV series. Basketful of Heads I didn't read, but it was very popular as well. But then you had other art writers and artists doing other ones, like The Dollhouse, for example, and he didn't write it, but he oversaw it because it's his label. So it's stuff like that. The horror genre is really exploding at the moment. There's a lot of horror out there. It depends what you're into, what your genre is. Like a good vampire one is The Strain, which they made into a TV show, right? It's the TV show, and even the comic book was done well. It was written by Guillermo del Toro.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is that how you pronounce him? I'm not sure. Right, but yeah, he wrote The Strain, and then they made a TV show out of it. It's a good mixture of magical lore and scientific lore. It's really, really good. There are so many. Obviously, Marvel have been doing horror since the 70s, with the Tomb of Dracula and Werewolf by Night.
See, sometimes I struggle to count some of those. Like, for example, Blade is a vampire story, right? So would you categorize that as a horror? I don't think so.
Superhero horror, maybe you could double genre it. Blade has been commercialized, so that's the problem, right? So, in Tomb of Dracula, he was much better. It was much better written.
Would Court of Owls count? There's horror elements to it.
Definitely, I would definitely call that dark thriller. I wouldn't say horror, but more thriller. Very dark. Snyder again. Snyder's a big horror writer. It's where he came from.
Yeah, and I feel like his older stuff's better than his new stuff.
Oh, I agree.
His new stuff is just Scott Snyder.
Oh,
garbage!
Nah, man, come on, man. What about Nocterra?
Yeah, Nocterra's one of my favorites.
Well, there you go. So
Nocterra is one of my favorites.
Nocterra is this commercialized comic book that's coming out of Image at the moment. And I think it's one of the best reads out there. It's so well characterized, character driven. At the same time, the story keeps going forward, keeps bringing up more diversity and adversity, into that story. It's very good. But
there's something else he wrote which had so much potential in the first issue, which was, I think it was called We Have Demons.
Oh yeah.
3-issue miniseries. I absolutely loved the first issue and what it was kind of potentially setting up. And then issue 2 and 3 just was like, oh, what is this Scott Snyder garbage?
I never read it, but I read Gideon Falls. That was
who writes that again? Is that?
I'd rate that. This is Jeff Lemire.
Yeah, I thought.
I'd rate that, and that's been coined for a TV show. He's just a great writer all around. He just really writes well.
Did you know he's Lee's favourite writer?
God, I did not know that. Shout out to Lee.
Shout out to Lee.
Whack.
That is another episode in the bag, Mark.
In the bag. In the bag. In the bag.
By the time this comes out, it's going to be like weeks away. So, but this is the first video I've used with my new camera. 4K.
I don't see any different. I don't see any different.
You can see that clearly.
Look at that 4K scar. Look at that.
If there's a horror title that we did mention that you think is great, let us know in the comments. I'd love to check it out. And obviously, if there's anything else you want us to talk about, make sure you let us know in the comments. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and say bye, Mark.
#FootGuy.
And keep it simple.